In the heart of the vast Pacific Ocean lies a place that time seems to have forgotten. A ring of coral, turquoise waters hiding something unimaginable beneath their calm surface. Today it is called Truk Lagoon, part of the Truk Islands in Micronesia. But during the height of the Second World War, it was known by another name, Japan's Gibraltar of the Pacific. Long before it became a graveyard of ships, Truk Lagoon was one of the most formidable fortresses ever built on water. Within its vast circular reef stretched a natural harbor more than 40 miles across, deep enough to conceal entire fleets, yet protected by surrounding islands that formed an almost impenetrable barrier. For Japan, it was the perfect stronghold. From 1942 onward, this lagoon became the beating heart of the Imperial Japanese Navy's operations in the South Pacific. From here, fleets sailed to conquer the Philippines, to strike at Guadalcanal, and to challenge the American advance across the Pacific. Aircraft from its airfields patrolled the seas, while submarines and warships rested safely inside the lagoon's protective embrace. Japanese planners believed Truk could never be touched. To them, it was an unsinkable fortress, too far, too fortified, too sacred to fall. At its height, the lagoon buzzed with life and purpose. Massive aircraft carriers like Shikaku and Zuikaku anchored alongside heavy cruisers, destroyers, and transports. Repair ships worked day and night, while supply vessels unloaded crates of ammunition, aviation fuel, and spare parts. Thousands of soldiers and sailors filled the islands. Barracks, hospitals, fuel depots, and airfields transformed the coral atolls into a city of war. For nearly 2 years, the lagoon was untouchable. American reconnaissance planes dared not approach, and Allied fleets lacked the range and strength to challenge Japan's naval hub. But by early 1944, the tide of war had shifted dramatically. Japan's empire, once vast and confident, was shrinking under relentless pressure. The United States had captured the Gilbert Islands and now advanced through the Marshalls, moving closer each month to Japan's inner defenses. Behind the scenes, U.S. intelligence had been studying Truk for years. Spy planes from distant bases risked their lives to photograph the lagoon. Submarines patrolled its perimeter, tracking the movements of ships entering and leaving. Each report confirmed what American commanders already suspected. Truk Lagoon was the key to Japan's Pacific defense line. Destroying it would cripple Japanese logistics and clear the path toward the Philippines and beyond. By early February 1944, U.S. Admiral Chester Nimitz approved an audacious plan. Operation Hailstone. It would be no ordinary raid. The plan called for a massive carrier strike, 9 aircraft carriers, 6 battleships, and dozens of cruisers and destroyers. The target, everything afloat inside Truk Lagoon. The Americans wanted to send a message, not just to destroy ships but to shatter Japan's sense of security. For too long, Truk had been untouchable. Now it would become a trap. In the days before the raid, Japan's intelligence service sensed danger. American forces had recently captured the Marshalls, only a few hundred miles away. Rumors spread among the officers stationed at Truk. Pilots reported seeing distant contrails on the horizon. Intercepted communications hinted that the U.S. fleet was on the move. Admiral Mainichi Koga, commander of the combined fleet, ordered the evacuation of the most valuable warships. Carriers and heavy cruisers slipped out of the lagoon days before the attack, bound for safer waters in Palau. What remained were support ships, transports, and smaller warships that could not sail in time. Thousands of men were left behind to defend the fortress, unaware that doom was already descending upon them. On the morning of February 16, 1944, the sky over Truk was clear and bright. Sailors on the islands went about their duties as usual. Some prepared breakfast, others worked on maintenance crews or loaded cargo. Then, just after dawn, radar operators on the island of Etten detected incoming aircraft. Within minutes, the horizon filled with the distant hum of engines. The first wave of American planes had arrived. More than 500 aircraft poured across the lagoon, fighters, dive bombers and torpedo planes launched from U.S. carriers stationed beyond the horizon. The attack began with a roar. Bombs fell upon airfields, hangars, and fuel depots. Japanese planes scrambled to intercept but were quickly cut down by Hellcats and corsairs sweeping the skies clean. On the ground, chaos erupted. Fuel tanks exploded in columns of flame that lit up the entire island chain. The heat was so intense that ammunition bunkers ignited one after another, turning into roaring infernos. Japanese sailors ran for cover as explosions shook the earth. Anti-aircraft guns barked furiously, but they were no match for the precision and power of the American strike. Inside the lagoon, ships tried desperately to escape. Some weighed anchor and fled toward the narrow passages in the reef. Others stayed behind, firing anti-aircraft guns at the diving attackers, but it was hopeless. From above, American bombers targeted them one by one. Torpedoes sliced through the water, striking ships at their center. Flames engulfed cargo vessels carrying ammunition and fuel, sending shockwaves across the lagoon. By nightfall, Truk was no longer a fortress. It was a burning graveyard. Dozens of ships lay shattered and sinking. Aircraft wrecks littered the airfields. The once mighty hub of the Japanese Navy had been destroyed in a single day. Yet amid the devastation, few could imagine what Truk Lagoon would become. For when the fires went out and the war moved on, the wreckage remained. Silent and untouched, resting on the sandy floor beneath crystal-clear waters. Over time, coral grew over the twisted steel, fish swam through broken hulls, and nature began to reclaim what war had left behind. Today, divers from around the world descend into those depths to explore the silent remains of Japan's lost fleet. They call it the Ghost Fleet of Truk Lagoon. Each wreck is a time capsule, frozen at the exact moment of destruction, engines still in place, porcelain dishes scattered on the floor, gas masks, rifles, and human remains lying undisturbed. What was once a place of war is now a haunting museum beneath the sea. But to understand the full story of this ghost fleet, one must return to the men who lived and died there, the sailors who believed in the fortress that would never fall. Their story continues in the next part, as the lagoon's secrets are revealed not only through history, but through the eyes of those who survived it. The morning of February 17, 1944, dawned with a stillness that felt unnatural. Smoke still curled from the shattered airfields on Dublin and Eton Islands, drifting lazily into a blue sky now haunted by the sound of distant engines. Below, the once bustling harbor of Truk Lagoon lay eerily quiet. Some ships still burned, their blackened hulks listing heavily in the calm water. Others drifted aimlessly, abandoned by crews who had fled for their lives. For the men who remained, the nightmare was far from over. Far to the northeast, over the curve of the horizon, the American carrier task force was preparing for its second and final day of attack. At dawn, flight decks aboard 9 U.S. carriers came alive with the thunder of activity. Crews rushed to fuel and arm the planes once more. The first wave of bombers rose into the sky, heading back toward the smoking lagoon that had once been Japan's pride. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding the operation from the heavy cruiser Indianapolis, had ordered complete annihilation of all enemy ships, airfields, and facilities. No target was too small, no structure too insignificant. The goal was not merely to cripple Truk, but to erase it as a functioning base of war. As the American aircraft crossed the lagoon's perimeter, they found little resistance. The Japanese Air Force stationed at Truk had been decimated the previous day. Burnt-out Zero fighters lay in rows along the runways. The few that could still fly were hastily launched, only to be cut down almost instantly by the waiting Hellcats above. What followed was not a battle but a relentless hunt. Dive bombers moved methodically from target to target. Their engines howled as they plunged from the clouds, releasing bombs that screamed toward the ships below. Each impact sent plumes of water and fire into the air. The lagoon became a cauldron of explosions, waves of destruction rolling across the surface. Japanese sailors manned anti-aircraft guns with desperate courage, firing into the sky until the barrels glowed red or melted entirely. Some crews abandoned ship, diving into the oily water, only to be caught in the blast waves of near misses. In the center of the lagoon, the massive transport Fujikawa Maru took several direct hits. One bomb penetrated its forward hold, detonating munitions that tore the ship apart from within. Flames engulfed the decks as the vessel slowly rolled onto its side. The men who survived the blast clung to floating debris, watching helplessly as their ship sank beneath them. Beneath the waves, its aircraft cargo settled gently into the sand, a silent memorial that would remain untouched for decades. Nearby, the armed merchant ship Eikoku Maru suffered a fate even more violent. A torpedo struck her amidships, igniting ammunition and fuel. The explosion was so immense that American pilots miles away saw the fireball erupt through the clouds. In seconds, the ship vanished, leaving nothing but fragments drifting on the surface. Hundreds of men died instantly, their remains never recovered. For survivors scattered across the lagoon, the inferno seemed endless. All across Truk, the same scenes repeated. Cargo ships, destroyers, tankers, and auxiliary vessels burst into flames one after another. The heavy cruiser Agano, damaged from earlier fighting, tried to escape through a channel but was caught by dive bombers and finished off in open water. The destroyer Oit, carrying survivors from another vessel, was split in half by a bomb and sank within minutes, taking nearly 300 men down with her. The lagoon that had once offered safety now became a watery tomb. On the islands themselves, chaos reigned. Japanese garrisons were cut off and isolated. Communications failed as cables burned and command posts were obliterated. Hospitals overflowed with wounded sailors brought ashore by small boats. Nurses and medics worked without rest, using salt water to clean wounds, wrapping the injured with whatever cloth they could find. For many, there was no hope of rescue. American aircraft strafed any movement, ensuring no reinforcements or supplies could reach the defenders. In the afternoon, American pilots turned their attention to shore installations. Fuel depots exploded in towering fireballs that rolled across the sky. Warehouses, barracks, and ammunition dumps vanished under waves of bombs. The roar of the assault echoed off the surrounding islands, bouncing through the lagoon like thunder trapped in a bowl of flame and smoke. Even nature seemed to recoil from the violence. On the American ships beyond the horizon, sailors watched the rising smoke columns with grim satisfaction. The radio chatter told the story: targets destroyed, ships burning, objectives complete. But beneath the professional tone lay something deeper: awe, perhaps, or disbelief. Even the veterans who had fought at Pearl Harbor and Midway had never seen such concentrated destruction. Truk Lagoon, once feared and respected, was being erased in real time. By nightfall, the raid was over. The last planes returned to their carriers, their pilots exhausted, their fuel tanks nearly empty. The decks glowed red under dim lighting as crews refueled and rearmed for the journey home. Below deck, officers gathered around maps, counting the damage. Reports confirmed the magnitude of the victory. More than 40 ships had been sunk, 70 aircraft destroyed, and dozens of installations wiped from existence. The Japanese Navy had lost over 4,000 men in just 48 hours. The U.S. Navy, in contrast, suffered minimal losses. Only a handful of planes failed to return, their pilots listed as missing. Operation Hailstone had achieved everything it set out to do and more. Truk was no longer a fortress. It was a graveyard. When dawn rose on February 18, the fire still burned. The lagoon was littered with oil slicks, drifting debris, and lifeless bodies. Many Japanese sailors who survived the initial attacks died in the following days, trapped on remote islands without food or medical aid. The once proud base had been reduced to silence, its power broken forever. Yet the end of Truk Lagoon's military story marked the beginning of another tale, one that would unfold not in the roar of war but in the quiet of the deep. As months turned into years, coral began to grow over the wreckage. Fish found shelter in the hollow hulls of ships. Sea anemones, Sponges and soft corals painted the rusting metal in bright colors. What had been instruments of death slowly transformed into living reefs. Beneath the surface, time stopped. Inside the sunken ships, artifacts remained exactly as they had been at the moment of destruction. Helmets resting on tables, gas masks lying beside rifles, telegraphs frozen mid-command. Divers who would later enter these wrecks would find them hauntingly intact, as if their crews had simply vanished, leaving everything in place. For Japan, Truk Lagoon became a painful memory, a reminder of vulnerability and defeat. For the United States, it stood as proof of naval superiority and industrial might. But beyond nations and flags, the lagoon held something deeper, a quiet testimony to the human cost of war, preserved forever beneath the sea. Even as the war raged on elsewhere, the battles of the Marianas, Leyte Gulf, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, the ghosts of Truk remained undisturbed. The lagoon faded from the headlines, forgotten by history for decades. Yet those who had fought there never forgot the sight of ships burning against a tropical sky, nor the eerie calm that followed when all that was left was the sound of waves breaking on coral reefs. Today, those same reefs guard the remains of the men who fought and died there. The wrecks of Truk Lagoon stand not as monuments of victory or defeat, but as silent witnesses to a moment when human ambition and destruction reached their peak and then sank into the depths of time. But Truk Lagoon's story does not end with war. Decades later, divers and explorers would return to uncover its secrets, shining light once more into the dark. What they found would reveal one of the world's most remarkable underwater museums, a place where history sleeps in the silence of the deep. That story unfolds in the next and final part, as modern explorers descend into the ghost fleet itself, discovering what the sea chose to preserve. For 20 years after the end of World War II, the world forgot about Truk Lagoon. The Pacific War had moved north, the headlines had turned to peace, reconstruction, and the Cold War. The once mighty base, now isolated and silent, was left to the sea and time. The islands returned to a slower rhythm. The coral reefs healed, and the wrecks below began to disappear from memory. Few outside Micronesia remembered what had happened in those 2 terrible days of February 1944. Then, in the early 1960s, word began to spread among divers and explorers of a strange place hidden in the western Pacific. Local fishermen spoke of vast shadows beneath the waves, of metal masts and gun barrels jutting from the seafloor. It was said that schools of fish swam through open cargo holds and that entire ships, still upright, rested on the sand as if waiting to sail again. To those who heard the stories, it sounded impossible. A fleet that had died and yet remained whole. In 1969, a group of American divers led by Jacques-Yves Cousteau set out to confirm the legend. They arrived at Truk Lagoon aboard the research vessel Calypso, carrying cameras, diving gear, and a sense of curiosity that bordered on disbelief. What they found would astonish the world. Beneath the calm surface lay an entire navy, preserved almost perfectly by the sea. More than 40 ships, from destroyers and cargo vessels to submarines and tankers, rested at depths ranging from 30 to 200 feet. The warm, clear water and sheltered reef had kept them intact, protected from storms and currents. Inside the ships, time had stopped on the morning of the attack. Cousteau's cameras recorded images unlike anything ever seen before. A bridge still held a captain's binoculars, waiting beside a corroded telegraph. A galley stove sat with its pots still in place. Typewriters, tables, and bottles of sake rested undisturbed in the quiet darkness. Even human remains were found, skeletal hands still gripping control wheels or resting beside helmets on the floor. The footage aired in 1971 as Lagoon of Lost Ships, a haunting television special that captivated millions and revealed to the world the existence of the ghost fleet of Truk Lagoon. In the years that followed, Truk became a magnet for divers and historians. Each wreck told a different story. The Fujikawa Maru, once a transport ship for aircraft, became one of the most famous dive sites on Earth. Its cargo hold still contained fighter planes, their wings folded neatly, their machine guns intact. Coral grew across their frames, softening the lines of war with the colors of life. The San Francisco Maru, known among divers as the $1 million wreck, held tanks, trucks, and mines still stacked as they had been loaded in 1944. The Haiyan Maru, once a luxury passenger liner converted into a submarine tender, lay on her side with torpedoes still lined up in racks, their warheads corroded but unmistakably deadly. Each ship was a story frozen in time, a moment of war preserved in perfect silence. For those who descended into the lagoon, the experience was more than exploration. It was communion with history. Divers described an overwhelming sense of stillness, as though the ocean itself was guarding a secret. The sunlight filtered down in golden shafts, illuminating the steel shapes resting on the sand. Fish drifted through doorways, and coral swayed like curtains in a house long abandoned. The silence was total, broken only by the hiss of breathing and the occasional echo of bubbles against rusted hulls. Some divers reported strange sensations, the feeling of being watched, the eerie awareness that these were not empty ships but graves. And indeed they were. Thousands of Japanese sailors had gone down with their vessels. Many were still inside, their remains scattered through the compartments where they had fought and died. Local islanders and visiting Japanese treated the wrecks as sacred ground. Offerings were sometimes left, small tokens of respect for those who never came home. As the decades passed, scientists began to study the lagoon more closely. They found that the wrecks had become living reefs, home to hundreds of species of fish and coral. The metal structures provided shelter for marine life that had flourished in the absence of pollution and human interference. Nature had transformed the instruments of destruction into sanctuaries of life. Yet beneath the beauty, danger still lingered. Many ships contained thousands of tons of oil, unexploded ammunition, and hazardous chemicals slowly leaking into the sea. The Ghost Fleet, while magnificent, was also fragile. Preservation efforts began in the late 20th century. Historians worked alongside marine biologists to document every wreck before corrosion and time claimed them. Underwater archaeologists mapped the lagoon, recording artifacts and ship positions, creating a living archive for future generations. For Japan, these expeditions became acts of remembrance. Families of lost sailors visited the lagoon to honor their ancestors, bringing prayers and incense that drifted across the water where their loved ones had vanished. In recent years, advanced technology has given new eyes to the past. Digital scans and submersible drones have captured the wrecks in astonishing detail, allowing virtual dives that anyone in the world can experience. High-resolution mapping has revealed items never seen before: sealed compartments, hidden weapons, even preserved personal belongings. The Ghost Fleet continues to tell its story, not through words but through the haunting imagery of a world caught between war and peace. For historians, Truk Lagoon stands as one of the most powerful symbols of World War II's transformation. Above the surface lies the tropical calm of the Pacific, a paradise of palm trees and sunlight. Below lies the full weight of history: steel, fire, sacrifice, and silence. Together they form a reminder of what human beings are capable of building and destroying, and how even the most terrible moments can be reclaimed by time. Every diver who descends into Truk enters not only the physical remains of a fleet, but the emotional shadow of the men who once served there. Inside those narrow corridors, among the rusting pipes and shattered glass, the presence of the past feels alive. A handwheel still gleams faintly where it has been touched for 80 years by the gentle movement of the sea. A porcelain plate lies unbroken beside a fallen ladder. On one ship's bridge, the ship's bell remains in place, its inscription barely visible through coral growth, a single, silent testament to a vanished era. Today, the Ghost Fleet of Truk Lagoon is considered both a World War II memorial and one of the greatest underwater museums on Earth. It attracts divers from every corner of the world, yet it remains a place of reflection more than adventure. The water is clear, the sunlight soft, and in that tranquility lies an unmistakable gravity. Each dive is a journey backward in time, to the moment when human courage met human folly, and the ocean became both witness and grave. In the end, Truk Lagoon tells a story that is larger than war. It is a story of how the sea remembers everything, how it preserves what we try to forget, and how life continues to grow where death once ruled. Beneath those still waters rest the remains of an empire, the echoes of battle, and the proof that even in destruction there can be beauty. The ships lie quietly now, resting on the soft floor of the Pacific. Coral covers their decks, fish swim through open doors, and the sunlight dances across their rusting hulls like the flicker of candlelight in a vast cathedral. The men who once served aboard them are gone, but their memory endures not in stone monuments, but in the living sea itself. The ghost fleet of Truk Lagoon remains one of the world's most haunting reminders of war, a silent museum where history sleeps beneath the waves, waiting for those who dare to descend and listen to what the ocean still remembers.